morning, or depending on when you're watching this, good afternoon, good evening, or good night. My name's Ross, and as always told out of Voice Radio. So today, we are continuing our look at the complete history of the Pokemon trading card game, and we have made our way over to EX Fire Red and Leaf Green. Clearly, obviously, sets designed to tie in with the games that were coming out around this time. As always, do please make sure you spam that like button, let me know these videos and this series needs to carry on. Now, this was released in Japan on April the 9th, 2004, and then is customary a few months later in English on the 30th of August, 2004. And yes, there was a Charizard. A very good Charizard. Well, playability-wise, no. Charizard, well, more recently it's been good, but certainly back in the day, Charizard was rarely good. But expensive and sought after. Oh my word, yes. And what I find very interesting about this set is looking down the list over at Bulbapedia, this is a set which entirely consists of Generation 1 Pokemon. We'd only just finished up getting all the Gen 3 Pokemon into the card game. Sorry, Deoxys, you gotta wait. And we're going back to Gen 1, but of course that does make perfect sense in the context of a set which is designed as, well, it's a Fire Red Leaf Green set. They were the remakes of Gen 1 games. Now, there was a pre-release promo, this was a bit of the old War Turtle, and we did actually have a box topper as well. It was the secret rare Charmander that was just one of the cards in the set. When you bought the set, you could pull the secret rare Charmander as a secret rare card. But there were actually 4 secret rares in the set, which makes it quite a bit more so than we saw in other sets. I mean, the last couple only had 1 and 2 respectively. As always, links to the previous videos in the description. And what we saw here was all of the legendary birds. All of the legendary birds did actually make it out into the set as secret rares. 2 of them actually turned out to be really good. Sorry, Articuno. You are often good in the game. Not this time, apparently. Well, we'll get more onto them a little bit later. Now, in terms of theme decks here, we did have 2, and as might be expected, the theme decks were Fire Red and Leaf Green. One theme deck themed very much around each of the games. No, obviously, you didn't get a Charizard in the Fire Red deck. That would be, a little bit silly. It would make that deck quite popular. It would sell out, although actually try buying one of those decks nowadays, quite frankly, ladies and gentlemen, you won't have a very easy time. Starting off with Fire Red, yes, we did get a lovely appropriate coin, as we tend to do lately, and you got yourself a holo Pidgeot, which is amazing, because Pidgeot wasn't just the best card in the set, right? Pidgeot was, by a strong argument, the best Pokemon in the game when it came out. It was a phenomenal card. We'll get there in a moment. You also got yourself 2 non-holo Arcanine. What is interesting, of course, even though you didn't get Charizard, Charmeleon was on the box, and you did actually get yourself a 4-2 Charmeleon line in the deck. You just didn't get yourself Charizard. Moving over into the Leaf Green deck, you got yourself a holo Beedrill, and you got yourself a couple non-holo Magneton. And once again, although Venusaur was conspicuous by his absence, you did get yourself a 4-2 Ivysaur line. Again, you got Ivysaur on the box there. It kind of made sense. I wonder how many people were mad about this at the time. I wonder how many people bought it expecting a Venusaur or a Charizard, which are not advertised on the front, incidentally, and then ended up getting quite disappointed when it turned out they weren't in there. I guess we'll never know. If you are one of those people or you know one of those people, let me know in the comment section. Now, in terms of the most expensive card, you should not be at all surprised to learn that it was, in fact, Charizard. Looking at eBay sold listings just in the past week, one sold for £250, comes in a bit over $300, but one also sold for £650, which comes in around $800, both claiming to be mint or thereabouts, so let's just say it's expensive. In terms of the next most expensive card, if you're lucky, you should be able to pick up a Blastoise for somewhere in the region of $100. Blastoise is a very popular Pokemon, being one of the first partners, but also was a very, very playable card. So if you're making old decks, you're going to want it. So that's why it ends up keeping quite a lot of its value. So just quickly then, let's run down the EXs in the set, because it's something I've started doing in these videos, and I'll be honest with you, it's kind of fun, and let's face it, the EXs are the most exciting cards in the set. Be rude if I didn't show you them all. So the Blastoise here allows you to attach as much water energy as you like during your turn. Decent attack and very, very good ability, plus popular Pokemon. And yeah, Blastoise is a very expensive card. Charizard comes in, obviously the most expensive card in the set. It's Charizard, right? Everyone loves it. We had a Clefable, which, yeah. There's an Electrode, which had a really good ability letting you accelerate energy, so that was pretty good. Gengar got an EX. Gengar was always going to get an EX, very popular Pokemon. And Gyarados, similarly, always going to get an EX, very popular Pokemon. We had the two different Mr. Mime, one that blocked odd number attacks, one that blocked even. Yes, I know that they all actually end in a 0, but you know what I mean. That did get reprinted a little bit later. And of course, Venusaur, because we need EXs of all the first part of the Pokemon. Be rude if we didn't have them. Though Venusaur, not the best one of them, I'm sorry. Now, in terms of the best cards, we might as well start off with Pidgeot here, because Pidgeot was a little bit over the top, dumb nuts good. You see, Pidgeot had an ability, Quick Search. And Quick Search let you, once during your turn, choose any card from your deck and put it into your hand. It literally let you search your deck for any card whatsoever. And at this stage, you should all be able to understand quite easily how this ended up being quite such a ridiculously good card. It let you search for any card, and there was no put it on top of your deck and try and draw it or any of that rubbish. Went straight into your hand. And then, of course, the race was on to try and counter Pidgeot. One of the more obvious counters printed was the Stadium Battle Frontier that turned off the abilities of evolved, colourless, darkness, and metal Pokemon. I mean, come on. Clearly that is there to try and take out this dude. Muck was also a very popular Pokemon in certain decks at the time. If it was your active Pokemon, you just got to ignore all Pokepowers and Pokebodies other than Muck's. And of course, that would include Pidgeot. And one of my favourite counters was actually the Pidgeot Delta from Hollow Phantoms that had the Pokebody Delta Reserve. As long as Pidgeot has any Hold-On Energy cards attached to it, each player's Pokemon other than Delta Pokemon cannot use any Pokepowers. So I very much appreciate the fact that we had a Pidgeot coming along that acted as a really nice counter to Pidgeot. Yeah, that one made me kind of happy. That one amused me, and I am not a very easily amused fellow. Nidoqueen was also a spectacularly good card from this era. I mean, I've shown you a couple of times already, but this Nidoqueen, I mean, it literally won the World Championships. It was one of the very, very best decks around for quite a while, quite frankly. Although I should mention, when it initially came out, it was kind of a surprise in that it was a rogue deck made by 3 people. The guy who won Worlds, the guy that runs 6 prizes, and Tablemon himself. And it's kind of interesting to note that it was under the radar until it came around and won Worlds and took everybody completely by surprise. Now, judging by modern standards, maybe Nidoqueen doesn't look that amazing. Pokebody says that as long as Nidoqueen is in play, all of your other Nidoran, etc. get free retreat. And for 1 energy, Toxic, Poison, but you put 2 damage counters on instead of 1 between turns. And 3 energy, 40 damage plus 40 more for each evolved Pokemon you have in play. You would obviously play it with Pidgeot, and I've mentioned a couple times the Milotic from Hidden Legends, which was very, very good for healing up all of your, and your opponents in fact, non-EX Pokemon, but you wouldn't play any EX Pokemon, so that really wasn't a big deal at all. Make no mistake about it, Nidoqueen was a rather ridiculously good card, and like I say, it won Worlds. Now, Blastoise was a very good card, but it took Blastoise a little bit of a while to get going. Blastoise had the Poke Power Energy Rain that just said as often as you like during your turn, you may attach a Water Energy from your hand to one of your Pokemon, and then put 1 damage counter on that Pokemon. The attack for free energy did 80 damage, flip until you get Tails. For each heads, your opponent discards an energy card from the defending Pokemon. And it was played on its own as a deck, but really it came into its own when we got the Lugia and Steelix from Unseen Forces. They were the cards that basically made up LBS, and LBS was very much one of the very, very best Pokemon decks around. But that really is more of an Unseen Forces deck. Blastoise very, very helpful in the deck, but shall we say, it was a little while before Blastoise itself was amazing. Speaking of which, Electrode. Electrode was another one of those that was a very, very good card, but it was later sets that really brought it into the top tier. Now, it had the Poke Power Extra Energy Bomb that let you discard Electrode EX and all the cards attached to it. Yes, it knocks it out. Yes, your opponent takes 2 prizes. But if you do, you search your discard pile for 5 energy cards and attach them to your Pokemon in any way that you like. Yeah, that was pretty good. It was really stuff like Dark Dragonite and Rayquaza EX later on that made it really amazingly awesome, but it was still a very, very good card that did have its time. Speaking of which, Ditto. Ditto was a very nice card, ladies and gentlemen. Ditto came around, and then Ditto does what Ditto does, right? It had a Poke Power form variation. Once during your turn, you may search your discard pile for a basic Pokemon, other than a Pokemon EX or another Ditto, and switch it with Ditto. But any cards attached to Ditto, damage counters, special conditions, effects, etc. go on to the new Pokemon. So it was a way of basically allowing you to have a Ditto down, but then swap it into whatever other Pokemon you liked. Drop it as a little bit of a surprise, etc. And I believe the ruling back then is as it would be now. If you switch it with a basic, that basic has been down for a turn, so you then can evolve it if you so wish. Led to some very nice surprises. Now, I did say that some of these birds were very, very nice, and they are. Zapdos was a lovely card. Once during your turn, when you put Zapdos EX from your hand onto your bench, you may switch one of your active Pokemon with Zapdos, and then move any basic lightning from those Pokemon to Zapdos, from any of your Pokemon to Zapdos. We've seen abilities like this before. I mean, nowadays, this sees a lot of play with Heatran GX. I say nowadays, that's if you're watching it in May 2020 as I record this. If you're watching it in the future, hey, how are them their flying cars? And it's good. It means you can get it rocking and rolling nice and easily. Then you've got the attack Electron Crush, 50 damage for free energy, but you may discard an energy from Zapdos, and if you do 70 more. Drop it as a surprise, get it rolling quickly, 70 for free energy, pretty good back then. And the other one that was really good was Moltres. Moltres was a very nice Pokemon. It's got the Poke Power Legendary Ascent. When you put it from your hand onto your bench, you may switch it with one of your active and move any fire energy from your other Pokemon to it. Gee whiz, does that sound a little bit familiar? Free energy, 60 damage, you may discard an energy from Moltres. If you do, confusion. Yay! I suppose we should give a quick shout out to Articuno while we're here. Again, we see the same Legendary Ascent ability. Again, we got a free energy attack. 50 damage, you may discard a card from Articuno, and if you do, your opponent discards an energy card from the defending Pokemon. I'm not saying Articuno was terrible or anything like that, but I am telling you that if you look around at the best decks of the era, you do see Zapdos and Moltres popping up. You don't see Articuno popping up really at all. Sorry. Now, moving away from legendary birds, Victreebel was actually kind of cool as well. The Victreebel here had a rather lovely ability, Acid Sampler, which said as long as it's your active Pokemon, put 1 damage counter on each defending Pokemon between turns. Remember, it says each defending Pokemon because back then it was possible to play the game 2 against 2, aping the more popular video game format that was generally played 2 on 2. And then free energy, 50 damage, and it stops your opponent retreating. So the theory here was try and trap them in the active, and then when they're trapped in the active, you are dropping damage counters on them, and hopefully they're not a Pokemon that's going to be able to attack, etc., etc. And you're on to a little bit of a winner. It was very much more of a fringe deck, I believe. But make no mistake about it, still a good card that did see a bit of play and saw a bit of success out and about. Now, Executor was also kind of a fun one here. Executor, as Executor tends to, had a very flippy attack. 2 energy, 40 damage, but what you actually did was you flipped as many coins as there were energy attached to Executor and did 40 damage for each heads. Though don't sleep on the colourless energy, shuffle your hand into your deck and draw 8 cards. Really good in a pinch if you really had nothing going. But generally Executor, and this is not the only time we've said this about an Executor, was pile energy on and smash. And the final Pokemon I really think we should shout out here is Kangaskhan. Now, Kangaskhan was a slightly unusual one in that it had 3 attacks. You really don't see that very often. Although something I did not make a big enough deal of last week, the Exploud from Hidden Legends has 4 attacks, which really is not something we see very often at all. So Kangaskhan here, it was fine. 1 colourless energy, draw a card, 2 colourless energy, 20 damage, 3 colourless energy, 30 damage, flip a coin, if heads, it did 60 damage. It was alright. It was a nice, big, beefy Pokemon that you could whack in the active to buy yourself a bit of time while you set up other decks. Now, moving into more of a trainer flavour here, we should give a shout out to Celio's Network. This was a supporter card that let you search your deck for a basic Pokemon or evolution card other than Pokemon EX and put it in your hand. And it's kind of underwhelming, it's just search for a Pokemon, that's it. You search for a Pokemon, but actually, it's still searching any Pokemon, and when it's better than a lot of the other options we've got, it gets pretty good. Speaking of searching Pokemon, this was a set that actually debuted Great Ball. Now, Great Ball is trainer card as it was back then, item card as it would be nowadays. Search your deck for any basic Pokemon other than EX, and put it onto your bench. Now, of course, we still have Great Ball nowadays. Great Ball lets you look at the top 7 cards of your deck, find a Pokemon, put it into your hand. Oh, yeah, that's actually very, very different. Great Ball as it was back then is actually Nest Ball, as we would remember it more recently, that lets you search for a basic Pokemon and put it onto your bench. Straight to your bench, so no coming into play abilities, etc. Obviously, phenomenal card because everyone's got to play basic, so Great Ball was very good Pokemon search. EXP All was also a new card which made its debut here and has come around as EXP Share more recently. EXP All, during your opponent's turn, if one of your Pokemon was KO'd by damage from an attack, you may take 1 basic energy card from that Pokemon, attach it to the Pokemon with EXP All, but unlike later versions of this, you then had to discard EXP All. You couldn't keep it around for a few turns and get multiple energy over using it. Still a very good card. And although it didn't see as much play back then as later incarnations would, this was the set that introduced the world to Versus Seeker. Versus Seeker being a rather phenomenal item card that lets you get a supporter card from your discard pile and put it into your hand. Yeah, that was pretty good. Now, in terms of top decks, we really have to start off talking about Queendom. Queendom was a deck that won the 2005 World Championships, and we've talked about this before. I've actually done a video about it. I'll link it in the description. But generally speaking, what you would do here is you would just use Nidoqueen And Nidoqueen would be your main attacker, Pidgeot would help you set up, and then you would have Milotic to heal your Pokemon and hopefully not your opponents. It was a little bit more complicated than that, but that was the deck in a nutshell, and honestly, ladies and gentlemen, this was just awesome. Absolutely awesome. Another deck which really came around and did surprisingly well was Zapdos Moltres, and I need to shout out PTCGRadio.com here for alerting me to this particular deck. And this was a deck that actually won the UK National Championships. And it was a deck that was very much built around Zapdos and Moltres. They would be your main attackers here, and you would use the aforementioned EXP all to move energy to them when your other Pokemon got KO'd. So you would basically cover for their expensive attacks by using EXP all to recover your energy. You didn't use Pidgeot, you used Battle Frontier to turn off Pidgeot, as did so many people back then, and you would set up behind Pokemon like the aforementioned Kangaskhan, but also Wobbuffet. Wobbuffet became a really good Pokemon in this particular deck because, of course, Wobbuffet had the ridiculous Pokebody safeguard that made it immune to any attacks from Pokemon EX. So against an EX deck, you could whack your Wobbuffet active and buy yourself a bit of time while you set up your slightly more awkward attackers. Very fun deck. Now, Executor Electrode was also a very fun one of the earlier decks that did make use of Electrode, and based on what I've told you about these cards so far, you can probably write this deck yourself. You've got Executor that does extra damage for each energy on it, assuming you can keep flipping heads, and you've got Electrode that will knock itself out, while allowing you to attach a whole bunch of extra energy. That's pretty good. I do, however, need to spoil a little bit of the surprise from our next video. Our next video is going to be EX Rocket Returns, and oh my goodness, that set was huge. That was probably one of the best sets we ever got. But one of the cards we got in there was Rocket's Admin, and Rocket's Admin shuffled both players' hands into their deck and made them draw a number of cards equal to their remaining prizes. So when you were KOing your own Electrode, it wasn't all bad news, because you could then put them down to a low hand size using Rocket's Admin, and it would work as a little bit of disruption as well. And then there was also a rather fun Victreebel Wheezing deck. And I do need to give a shout out to the lovely Jason Klaczynski and his lovely blog for making me aware of this deck. And essentially, you would have the Victreebel from this set that would trap Pokemon active while putting damage on them because they were active. And you would combine it with the Victreebel from Legend Maker, which let you, once during your turn, switch one of your opponent's bench stage 2 with their active. Although your opponent got to choose which stage 2 became active. But hopefully they would have some stage 2s that wouldn't be able to attack so well, and essentially you would just trap them in the active, and they would be kind of stuck, and then you'd be dropping damage on them. But this also used the Wheezing that came around in Deoxys, the single energy attack liability, put damage counters on the defending Pokemon until it was 10 HP away from being KO'd. Wheezing then did 70 to itself, KOing it, and what would you pop active when it got KO'd? Victreebel, which would then drop 1 damage counter on, and oh look, would get the KO instantly. A very, very fun little combo deck, of which I'm rather fond. This was a good set. It introduced some truly amazing cards like Pidgeot, Blastoise, Electrode, etc., while also giving us one of the most collectible sets we'd had in quite some time. I told you that previous EX era sets were not as collectible as the e-reader sets. This is, shall we say, a bit of an exception to this, given the whole Charizard EX thing. So there we go, ladies and gentlemen, that's what you need to know about EX Fire Red and Leaf Green. But as always, I would love to know your memories of the set. I'd love to know if you played back then, what you played, what your favourite decks were, etc. So let me know in the comment section. Go nuts, be nice. And then make sure you like this video, subscribe to this channel, follow me on Twitter at TheWassy, and Twitch for some live action at twitch.tv/TheWassy. patreon.com/PTCGRadio. If you want to support the channel, get some bonus podcasts and all that good stuff, head on over to patreon.com/PTCGRadio, where you can do exactly that. And please do make sure you're checking out youtube.com/WassiePlays, where you can find out about a whole bunch of games that don't have Pokemon in, but are pretty gosh darned awesome nonetheless. But by far the most important thing, as always, look after yourselves till next time, would ya? Thank you very much for watching. My name's Ross, and you've been watching PTCG Radio.